Hello and welcome to the Arc Woman podcast. This is an exploration of womankind. Here we discuss what it is to be a woman in the modern world while utilizing ancient and modern modalities in tandem to create a bounty of health for the body, mind and spirit.
G'day everyone and welcome back to the pod. You haven't heard from me for a few months and then you get 2 podcasts in the space of a week. How lucky are you? What is she going to do next? I don't know. But she's got ADHD, so we'll never be able to tell. But it's nice to be back. It's nice to be doing solo podcasts again. I have a few more really exciting ones coming up, interviews with 2 incredible women. How lucky are we to live in this age where we can just record amazing conversations with beautiful professional women in health and give you free education? How incredible is that? So first up, if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't liked, if you haven't commented, I know it's super fucking lame, but can you please do it? Because it allows me to keep doing this, researching, putting together all of the information that I need to make these podcasts. It takes a lot of work out of my day, out of my time, that I could be doing other things like wanking and frolicking around my property butt naked. I'm giving up that quality time for you, babe. Please do your due diligence and just subscribe. All right? Okay. Good chat. In all seriousness, no, we are going to be talking about the stress cycle today. And I wanted to talk about the stress cycle because, boy, did I experience it. March was a really big month for me, socially, family-wise, clinic-wise. I have a wait list for my clinic now because girl was not organized and didn't see that she had so many new clients coming. If you're listening to this and you're in my books and we've had an appointment, hey, babe, nice to see you here. But yeah, I really had a hard time in March. My sleep sucked. My stress was through the roof. And the reason why is because I'm on the spectrum, although I don't necessarily seem that way because I'm smart and hot. Fun fact, women can be on the spectrum and be smart and hot, shock, horror. I get it all the time. People are like, actually, women usually don't say this. You don't seem autistic. You don't seem like you have ADHD. Okay, sorry. Do you want me to be obsessed with trains or something? What do you want from me? Anyway, so March was really intense for me. First day of March, Human Women's Health Collective, look them up, amazing organization doing incredible work in Tasmania. Debut festival, that went really well. Thousands of women came through the town hall doors, education, workshops, panels, was incredible. But that was a 16-hour day, plus set up, plus pack up with amazing women that I feel so grateful to know. God, I fucking love them. They're incredible women. Please check out the website, humanwomenshealthcollective.com.au. Check them out. That was our first festival. And then I went into a really crazy week of clinic. And then that weekend I went to a festival with my partner. And my ovulation was postponed because my body didn't register the environment I was in conducive to risk pregnancy. Which we'll talk about cortisol and what it can do to putting off our cycles later in this podcast. That is fascinating. Your period's never late. Your ovulation is late and it pushes back your period. And so I got my period late in March, about 5 days late. I wasn't scared about getting pregnant. My partner knew it was up and my period did come. Thank God for us in our goals of parenting right now. That's not where we're at. Not yet, at least. And then another week of really crazy clinic. And then my parents came and visited, which was so wonderful. I feel so grateful to have a good relationship with my parents. My mother and my father are some of the best people I know. I really look up to each of them for different reasons. It was so wonderful to have them here in Tasmania. They loved it here. But that was really stressful as well because I was tethered. I had been off of the back of really social weekends and then also clinic on top of that as well. And whenever I have women in my clinic, I'm always bringing my A game. I'm always on top of it. At least I hope I am. So yeah, I really didn't have that much left. And by the time it was the end of March, I was just a mess. I was a stressed mess. So I wanted to get on the other side of that now that it's almost the end of April and talk about the stress cycle, talk about how it can show up in your life, how you can move through it, how you can recognize what stage you're in and how to turn things around and end the stress cycle, aka learn from my mistakes, bitch, because I did not practice what I preached. I put everything above myself in that month, which having a business, having family visit, being a part of an organization, being in a relationship, sometimes that's just what that is. And sometimes stress does just happen. I definitely could have done better in that time of my life. Maybe I'm making this podcast for myself, but I'm also making it for you. So let's get into it. Let's start with the adrenal glands, and let's start with cortisol and what that looks like and what it governs in the body and all of the misunderstandings that we have about it in the zeitgeist of health. Let's start with the adrenal glands. So they produce essential hormones like cortisol, aldosterone, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. They play key roles in regulating metabolism, immune function, blood pressure, heart rate, and the body's response to stress. The adrenal glands live right next to your liver. They live in the middle of your back. A lot of people, when they're like, oh, my adrenal glands hurt, they touch kind of near their hips. And I'm like, oh, girl, no. We need to go back to human bio, because that's not at all where they are. They live in the middle of your back. If you've ever had any type of kidney infection or any type of like pain in the renal area, that's where you usually feel it. So they produce 4 hormones or 5 hormones, or actually they produce way more than that, but these are the ones that we want to focus on. So first up, adrenaline and noradrenaline. So these are produced in the adrenal medulla. They increase heart rate, force of contractions of the heart. They increase blood flow to the brain and muscles, and they help to metabolize glucose. So this is really smart, right? If we're in a stressful situation, we want to be able to make sure that energy, blood, nutrition, and glucose can get to our extremities so we can fight and flee away from a perceived stress. The other one is aldosterone. So this is a hormone that regulates the amount of salt and water that the kidneys retain and how much potassium they excrete. So this will control blood pressure. And so this is really important in times of stress, whether we want to have vasoconstriction, so we're constricting and decreasing the diameter of blood vessels, or whether we're going to dilate them, right? So basically, it's not so much when you're stressed, there'll be constriction, and when there's no stress, it will be dilated. Not necessarily. Vasoconstriction and vasodilation happens all the time in the body for different reasons. When we're relaxed, we will see vasoconstriction to the areas in the body where we don't need blood flow, and vice versa for when we're stressed, right? So it's almost like aldosterone is really, really great and making sure our body is able to regulate our vasoconstriction and vasodilation of blood pressure and blood regulation throughout different parts of the body, depending on the goal at the time. DHEA is also something that our adrenal glands produce. Our liver also produces this, and this is going to be used to make androgens and estrogens as well. This is really important in puberty. This is one of the ones that we test in PCOS. And famously, drumroll, cortisol. So very misunderstood molecule, and we talk a lot about her. So this is a hormone that controls how the body uses fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. It increases the availability of glucose to the brain, red blood cells, and skeletal muscles. Interesting fact, cortisol can pass the blood-brain barrier. All of these other hormones can't do that. Cortisol can. And cortisol is a really, really important hormone, and it's not just for stress. It does lots of different things as well. Cortisol, it's a hormone. It's a steroid hormone. It's derived from cholesterol. It plays a really crucial role in immune function, memory. When we have cortisol, it should be balanced, and it needs to be controlled and released at different times. So think of cortisol as a hormone of energy, not just a stress hormone. We need it around. We don't want to just lower and eradicate cortisol. We want to make sure it's balanced and it's being released at the right time during the day. So we also have to keep in mind that cortisol will compete with estrogen and progesterone, meaning that if we have more stress, more of that cholesterol is going to be converted into cortisol rather than sex hormones. So I want you to understand your central nervous system and your body from 2 perspectives. This is a really crude explanation, and I'm explaining it to you in this way so you understand your body. You have 2 arms of your nervous system called sympathetic and parasympathetic. Sympathetic is we perceive stress. This is not a safe environment to reproduce. We are going to survive, not thrive. I'm going to push all of the blood to our extremities so we can fight and flee a situation. Right? Survive, not thrive. Sympathetic. we will see cortisol being released a lot around this time because cortisol loves you and it is being released to protect you and energize you so you can get away from a perceived threat. Parasympathetic is rest, reproduce, and revitalize. I am not surviving, I am thriving. There is more than enough around. I feel safe, I can reproduce, I can push cholesterol and make reproductive hormones because I perceive this environment to be safe to reproduce. Okay? We don't really see a lot of cortisol around at this time, although it is still around. Just wanted to tell you that before we move on. In both of these systems, we will see cortisol, but they will function very differently. So when you wake up, your cortisol levels are going to be at the highest when you wake up, and this helps to stimulate wakefulness. So yes, you can be in your parasympathetic nerve innervation, you could be in a calm environment, you will still have at one point in your day extremely high cortisol, and that's normal. Cortisol peaks usually in the morning when you usually wake up. But for normal ranges, we usually see cortisol peaks around 7 to 8 o'clock in the morning. And they reach their lowest point around 2 o'clock to 4 a.m., right? Really, really important. When we look at a diagram over time, it's not just up in the morning and down throughout the day. We see different peaks. So cortisol is going to peak, say, if you get in a traffic jam and you're late for work, or you notice that you've forgotten something. You know, you're late to pick your child up, you feel stressed, or you have a stressful conversation with someone, whether it be a partner or you get a text from someone, and that really stresses you out. You're going to get a peak of cortisol, but it's never, hopefully never, going to be the same amount as the peak you had in the start of the day. The peak in the start of the day is really important because this tells your body, hey, we're awake, we're around, we're going to activate these systems, we're going to, increase our heart rate. Basically, we're going to get ready for the day. This is your wake up hormone. It's normal to have a high amount of cortisol in the morning and then it tracks down throughout the day. Maybe you have a cold shower in the morning. Maybe you have a cup of coffee. Maybe you're late for work. These stresses are normal and you will see a short-term increase in cortisol at this time and then it'll start to go down. That's usually what a normal cortisol system will do. So let's talk about a stress response though, because what happens in these stress response and what does it do to the body and what is the stress cycle that we usually see? Okay, first, say we perceive a stress and we have to remember ancient body, modern system. Your body does not know the difference between a huge stress being, everyone says this saber-toothed tiger. I think that's a really good example. Or maybe it could be a different stressor as well. Humans are social creatures. If we move out of the social construct of our culture, that is stressful because it means that we could be pushed out of our society and we would have to fend for ourselves, which is risky for us, right? So this is how your body perceives threat and this is how your body sees the world. It doesn't know that we live in a modern age and you've gotten a stressful text from your mum or you're late for work or you're overworking yourself and there's a deadline and you're not meeting it, or you're late to pick your child up. Your body just goes, stress. I am perceiving stress. I'm going to initiate a stress response, which is normal, and in healthy people, it's short-lived doses. So what happens when we perceive stress? Okay, so your pituitary gland, which is a gland in your brain, will release something called ACTH. That basically goes in the blood system and tells the adrenal gland, hey, stress. Your adrenal glands go, no worries. I'm going to release adrenaline and cortisol. And then that's going to act on different parts of the body. So the first thing that it's going to do is it's going to go to your liver, and cortisol basically says, hey, we're stressed. So we're going to have a stress response. We need to run away or fight this perceived threat. We need to survive right now. We're not thriving. And the liver goes, great, I have all of this glycogen, this stored glucose. I'm going to convert that and put that into circulation because I want that to go to the blood, to the muscles, and that glucose to go to the muscles so we can fight, flee, freeze, and survive this stress response. Then cortisol and adrenaline, they'll go over to your heart rate and say, hey, stress. Heart goes, great. Okay, so I know the liver is going to be pushing lots of glycogen and glucose into the blood circulation. I need to make sure it's going to get to our extremities so we can fight or run away, from this perceived stress. Then cortisol and adrenaline goes to your lungs and says stress. Lungs go, great, I'm going to increase heart rate, which means I'm going to have short, shallow breaths. And I need to do this because heart rate is up. And, there's an inverse and adverse relationship between your lungs and your blood pressure. So the faster and shallower you breathe, the more your heart rate goes up. And when you have deep, deep, long breaths, your breath rate will decrease and therefore your heart rate will decrease. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg situation, but we know that cortisol and adrenaline will impact the lungs in this way and say, hey, stress. Okay, I'm going to have short, shallow breaths because this is going to oxygenate the blood faster because we need oxygen in our muscles so they can constrict their fibers, their muscle fibers, so we can fight or run away from this perceived stress. You get tunnel vision, your digestion will also slow down. And the reason why your digestion will slow down is because we're not in parasympathetic. We're not in rest and digest and reproduce anymore for this short period of time. Your body's going, okay, we're not going to try and reproduce right now. That is not the priority. We are going to slow down digestion. We're going to vasoconstrict all of the blood vessels going towards the digestive system. And this is what I mean. It's not so typecast. When we're in parasympathetic, everything is vasodilated and super relaxed. No, not necessarily. We actually see some vasoconstriction in the muscle fibers and all of the blood going to our muscles because they're not needed, right? And this happens in our stress response when we have a sympathetic stress response, which is, I will say this multiple times, healthy. If you're having a stress response like this is a healthy response. This means that your stress response, your pituitary gland, your ACTH, your adrenal glands, and all of your organ systems are working and they're working well. This is a normal response. The other thing that I find really interesting about this as well is that because we see vasoconstriction in the digestive tract, this means that our gut microbiome in a short period of time will be negatively impacted. The diversity will go down. We will see less activity there because there's less movement through the digestive tract and our microbes don't have insoluble fiber to feed on, basically. So that's something really interesting. And that's why over a long-term period of time, people with negative stress responses over a long period of time, maybe they have a really stressful life, will have digestive problems. Another reason why is because of a hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, so the HPA axis. So this regulates cortisol production. This reflects the communication between your brain and adrenal glands. Your brain recognizing stress, telling the adrenal glands stress, release more stress hormone. So what can worsen this as well is that cortisol will go over to our white blood cells and say, hey, stress. And your white blood cells will go, okay, this is great that you're telling us. Thank you so much. We're going to move away from the microbiome and we're going to go to the extremities, because if we hurt ourselves in fighting or running away from this perceived threat, we need to be at the extremity of the body, at the periphery of the body, in order to protect us from possible pathogens breaking past that skin layer. How amazing is that? And so when we usually see long-term activation of the stress response and higher cortisol in people, not just women, in people, is that we usually see white blood cells that are slightly elevated. And we also see their microbiome is negatively impacted for this reason. How interesting is that? But we have to remember that this stress response was supposed to happen maybe once a day, maybe not even that. And when we were in the wild, as wild human beings, there was an obvious start and end to a perceived stress. But now we don't really have that, because the issue that's arising here is that our adrenal glands are continuously producing cortisol in response to perceived stress, because in today's world, stress is constant. From city lights, light at night, traffic jams, eating on the go. This situation is representing an evolutionary mismatch. Our bodies have not adapted to the genetic level of relentless stress in modern life. Historically, our physiology was designed to handle occasional stresses like evading a predator, but the continuous stress we face today is unprecedented. And so what actually happens in this stress cycle where we don't have an obvious end? So we have early inflammation. So cortisol levels rise. We struggle to control inflammation because our white blood cells are activated because that's cortisol's job. And then we see cortisol resistance, and we don't see white blood cells actually responding to cortisol properly anymore. We see this progression of inflammation, and we see hormonal chaos come after that as well, because cortisol will negatively impact our hypothalamus. So we have to remember that those two examples I gave to you of the body, parasympathetic and sympathetic, parasympathetic being rest, digest, reproduce. I'm going to take all of this cholesterol and I'm going to turn it into sex hormones because it's safe. I feel like I'm okay to reproduce. This is a safe environment. There's an abundance of food. I feel safe within my community. Whereas if we are in a sympathetic stress response, our body is going to be taking that cholesterol and be making what? It's going to be making cortisol. And so that's why we start to see all of these negative impacts on our women's body. I also want to add in as well hormonal birth control and its impact on the adrenals. So hormonal birth control will disrupt the ovarian adrenal thyroid axis. And this is really crucial for balancing hormone levels and adrenal function. And so this leads to HPA dysregulation. And so this will manifest with symptoms associated with like chronic levels of cortisol in the system. We will have high inflammation. Hormonal birth control in of itself is inflammatory. We usually see an elevation in women who are on hormonal birth control for longer than 6 months, which is not a long time considering how long women are usually on hormonal birth control. So it elevates cortisol binding globulin, which is a protein that binds to cortisol and prevents it from performing its intended functions in the body. And so this prevents cortisol from effectively reducing inflammation, because cortisol will increase inflammation, but it's also really great at decreasing it as well. And that's why we have the end of the stress cycle. But if we have hormonal birth control making more of this globulin, it's going to be binding cortisol and stopping it from ending the stress cycle. So women with hormonal birth control in some way are in a stress cycle that never seems to end because it disrupts that HPA dysregulation and it stops that from being able to end the cycle. We also see nutrient depletion. So it depletes essential nutrients like magnesium, zinc, and B vitamins. These are really, really essential for adrenal health and function. This is really, really important for helping our liver to process excess cortisol effectively. So when our body's going, okay, it's all done, your body can't do that because there's this globulin around and it's negatively impacting our ability to recover post-stress, right? We also see that hormonal birth control just raises resting cortisol level. We usually see delayed cortisol peaks and lower cortisol levels upon awakening. So it doesn't just increase your cortisol, it dysregulates the whole cortisol system. And then it'll decrease the HPA axis's response to stress. So I know women on hormonal birth control who have been through really stressful times in their life, and it wasn't until way later that they experienced the stress. Or maybe they came off of hormonal birth control and they had this rush of anxiety. And the reason why is because you've always had that feeling of stress. You've always been experiencing that stress, but it's the first time your body's actually been able to feel and respond to that stress, which in the short term is heinous and feels horrible. And that's probably one of the reasons why women go back on hormonal birth control, especially for things like anxiety. And that's why I have that whole course, Hormonal Harmony, that talks about the stress response, hormonal birth control, and kind of what you need to do before you go off hormonal birth control to stop that stress cycle from happening again, especially if you went on hormonal birth control for anxiety and it's helped your anxiety. That's going to come back with a vengeance. I'm really sorry to tell you. And you need to do some work before you go off of hormonal birth control. And we will be going over some things to end the stress cycle at the end of this podcast. So hang around for that. One of the interesting things about cortisol is that it stops you from ovulating. And I think this is really interesting. So your hypothalamus will release something called gonadotropin releasing hormone. And that basically tells your pituitary gland to release follicular stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Follicular stimulating hormone starts the cycle. It stimulates the follicles to mature. And so then the next thing is they produce lots and lots of estrogen that reaches a high set point. And then your hypothalamus will go, okay, I'm just going to check on everything. And this is what happened to me. My hypothalamus is like, this bitch is at a festival. She hasn't slept for days. She's walking around a lot. She's probably not eating enough. And there's this stick in her back and she can't sleep. This is not a time to ovulate. This is not a safe environment to reproduce. So we're not going to. So I'm going to shut down GnRH and I'm not going to release luteinizing hormone, which means that she's not going to ovulate. And that's what happened to me. And this is what happens to women all the time. So say you do something really stressful over your ovulation. Maybe you travel, maybe you get sick, maybe even in cases like of, just going to a festival. And even though you're psychologically, you're having a great bloody time, your body is still not going to register this as a safe environment to reproduce. So it's not going to release luteinizing hormone. It's going to wait. Okay, are we safe? Cool. I'm going to release gonadotropin releasing hormone. And that means that we're going to ovulate, which means that this period's going to be a little bit late. So that explains that. It can also cause anovulatory cycles. So you might experience cycles without any ovulation. Just because you get a period doesn't mean you've ovulated. Women with PCOS will know this vehemently. We'll also see lots of PMS symptoms. The reason why is because cortisol can be made, or progesterone can be made into cortisol. This is an amazing evolutionary mechanic system, I believe. And it just really speaks to how your body in that first 12 weeks is always going to prioritize you above anything else. I had a client a while ago who said that, she was 8 weeks pregnant and then she viewed a really horrendous car crash and she lost her baby. She miscarried a week later. And I was talking to her about how progesterone can be a precursor for cortisol and how this is a mechanism that her body has in place to protect her because it doesn't know the difference between a physiological and a psychological stress and the modern world and the ancient world. And so what can happen with this is, say, even if you're in the early stages of pregnancy, if you experience a stressful experience, your body's going to go, we're not going to have this baby because this is too stressful. Even if you're not pregnant and you've had no fertilization and implantation, like I had, hopefully, in March, I might be wrong, we'll never know, is that progesterone can be made into cortisol. This is an amazing system. So this basically speaks to, okay, we might be pregnant, we might have implantation here, but this environment is not safe to bring a baby into the world and to fall pregnant. So we are going to turn all of that progesterone, pro-pregnancy hormone, into cortisol. And I saw this in real time because progesterone increases your basal body temperature. And I saw that I ovulated. So my temperature went down and then it went up massively. And I was in the 36s, I think it was 36.5, that's indicative of ovulation. And it was high. And then it went super low when I went through clinic and I had to overextend myself socially. And that was just a stressful week of clinic. Not for any particular reason because my clients were stressful or anything, but because I felt stressed and I had to overextend myself. And so my body was like, okay, we need energy to push us through this. We're going to make cortisol. And thank God we have all of this progesterone around. And so I saw my temperatures go down. And so if you're taking your body temperature, this is a great way to keep an eye on your cortisol and how frequently your progesterone is converting into cortisol to protect you. When this happens, you're going to get some really heinous PMS symptoms because when progesterone isn't around, it's not going to upregulate GABA production in the gut. It's not going to calm down the central nervous system. It's not going to regulate thyroid production. Progesterone is an amazing molecule. So is estrogen. Both of them are incredible molecules and they do lots of different things in the body. But I experience things like mood swings, intense cravings for sugar. And these are things that further aggravate cortisol imbalances as well. And they create a persistent cycle of disruption as well. So if you've noticed that you're really stressed in your luteal phase, well, this is actually a time we need to be calming down the stress. This is the time we need to be chilling out the most because we have lots of progesterone that our body can readily make into cortisol. And so this can lead to progesterone deficiency. Because progesterone is a precursor for cortisol in times of high stress, your body may deplete progesterone while trying to manage cortisol. And so if you have estrogen dominance or if your progesterone is low in comparison to estrogen, this is a huge problem. This is a really big indicator and message to you that we need to keep stress pretty low in that luteal phase. What about other things that can stimulate cortisol? One I think is on everyone's mind is caffeine. We will touch on it. So caffeine is a stimulant. It impacts both the brain and the adrenal glands, and it prompts them to release stress hormones, including cortisol. So adrenal glands are really crucial for managing stress, which we also spoke about. But when they're persistently overburdened with the need to produce extra cortisol, whether due to actual stress or stimulating effects of caffeine and any other type of medication as well, ADHD medication, we know increases cortisol. Nicotine, we know increases cortisol. So if you're taking any type of stimulant, it's going to be increasing your cortisol levels. And if you're taking them in your luteal phase, rest assured, your body is going to be very readily turning that progesterone into cortisol. Another one is fasting. And so especially if you have HPA dysregulation, short-term fasting can lead to increased cortisol production by the adrenal glands. This can be great. Fasting can be awesome, which is why I have a whole masterclass and a chart on this, because there are people out in the zeitgeist who are saying that they're doctors, but they're really just chiropractors trying to teach women about fasting. And I've read their books, and the only studies they have are on rats who were given hormonal birth control. You know who I'm talking about. But basically, you can fast, but you need to be really, really careful on when you're fasting. And you can't really fast that much in your luteal phase. You can fast in other times of your cycle, but fasting, if you have high cortisol, is really not a good idea. Not at all. It's going to worsen it. Absolutely. Fasting can be incredible. It can be quite healing for the body. It can initiate autophagy, which is kind of like cell death and cell eating and regeneration, which can be anti-cancer, anti-diabetes. There's a reason why lots of cultures have practices of fasting, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's good for everyone. I think the interesting thing is, like in Muslim cultures, like Ramadan, I'm not sure how much you know about Muslim cultures, but Ramadan, it's about 30 to 40 days of not eating from sun up to sundown. Women who are menstruating are not allowed to take part in that. Once they've stopped bleeding, they're allowed to. And I think that really speaks to how people understand that women can't fast the same as men. But there's lots of differences in the cycle and when progesterone is around, as opposed to, FSH, LH, testosterone, and estrogen, and when you can fast. But if you want to know more about that, I have a whole podcast on fasting. I have a whole masterclass and a whole chart on that as well. So I'm not going to get too into it, but yes, fasting in the short term, especially if you have cortisol dysregulation, will mean that you're going to have more of a cortisol increase. The other thing that I want to talk about is our set point. So if you can imagine, my hand is sitting quite low, kind of around my tummy. This is like the cortisol set point of a healthy person. And say just above my head, if I bring that above my head, say that's a car crash or someone, a really stressful experience. Maybe you viewed something really, really stressful. Maybe this is a stressful moment for you just personally in your social life. I don't know what you find stressful, what you perceive as stress. If you can imagine the worst thing could happen, that's over my head. But not everyone has this low set point of cortisol that they're born with. We actually inherit our nervous systems from our mum, which could be bad. It could also be really great. But most women I know are pretty stressed. And that means that the daughters they're going to have are going to have a pretty dysregulated cortisol system. So instead of their low set point sitting at around where my belly would be, it might be around my eye level. So say what happens when something really stressful happens. Your set point of stress is already really, really high. So a tiny stress, being late for work, not meeting a deadline, these things are going to push your stress level up to the max. So you might have been told or realized within yourself, I overreact to tiny stresses. My stress response is over and above what I would be considered as normal. And the reason why is because of things like past traumas. You have inherited your mother's nervous system, and maybe she wasn't a very calm person. Also, if you have just experienced something in your childhood, your cortisol system is going to be set higher. Why? Because your body loves you and it doesn't want to thrive. It wants to survive right now. It hasn't been told that the stress cycle has ended. So with PTSD and complex PTSD, we are reliving that traumatic experience through triggers over and over and over again. And that is reinforcing this stress cycle and this set point of cortisol being quite high. And so this is why women with PCOS, they're far more likely to have experienced a stressful childhood. And this is because their cortisol is higher. Their cortisol is higher means their blood glucose is higher, which means what? Their insulin is higher. When we have high insulin, high blood glucose, and high cortisol, that means we're not going to ovulate. Why? Because the body does not recognize the environment as safe. When we have a cortisol set point that's set quite high, we can test this. So the best way is to test this. We can do a 2 or a 4 point cortisol test. And so this is a bit gross. You might not like this, but it's through saliva. So saliva cortisol tests are the best way to test cortisol. And so an optimal level for that is probably going to be around 3.7 to 9.5 nanograms per milliliter in the morning. And then you can do one at night as well. But I really like the 4-point saliva cortisol test, but I almost always will recommend the 2-point because it's just as good. You know what I mean? But I just think the 4-point gives you a really good diagram of what your cortisol is doing throughout the day. Another one you can test for looking at your stress system is DHEA. So elevated levels of this can occur in early stages of adrenals stress, and then it can bottom out when we're, pretty deep into a stress response that hasn't been resolved. ACTH is also one that we can look at. Remember, that's that hormone that our brain is telling our body and our adrenal glands to release cortisol. So those are some labs that you can definitely go and get. Minerals, definitely go and look into minerals, and your white blood cells and things like inflammatory markers like CRP. It's going to be individualistic depending on what symptoms you have, because high cortisol can negatively impact so many other systems. If you have really irregular cycles and you have signs of hirsutism, you might be a candidate for PCO or PCOS. If you're not ovulating and your estrogen's really high, you might have estrogen dominance problems. When cortisol is really high as well, it negatively impacts our thyroid's ability to make T3 and T4 and convert it into an active form in the gut, which means we might gain weight, we might lose hair, our nails might get really brittle. My hair started to fall out a little bit more, and I was like, oh shit, I'm in a stress response. My scalp cannot access nutrients to grow new hair, and my hair is falling out. Oh, okay. You have to remember, your body is not going to maintain the non-essential parts of you. It's going to only maintain the essential parts of you if it perceives a stressful environment. Hopefully you understand that stress cycle. There's so much to it. I do feel like the examples and the rundown I gave to you was as detailed as I possibly could give you as a layperson. I could get really, really nerdy. There are probably a lot of people on here listening to this who want me to get really, really nerdy, but I also just want this to be accessible. So hopefully you really understand that. And hopefully you can respect your body and go, oh my gosh, my body loves me so much. And it's my job to make sure that I'm ending this stress cycle. So how do we do that? First one, and the cheapest one, is light. Remember, cortisol peaks in the morning, troughs over the course of the day, reaches its lowest point between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning, which is why if you're waking up at 2 or 4 o'clock in the morning, this is a problem because your cortisol is peaking way too early. And that could be an argument as well for going to sleep a little bit earlier, but I digress. Getting sunlight in the morning is really, really important. So you want to be getting about 100,000 light lux. So that's how light spectrums are registered and measured in the literature. And we need about 100,000 of them in the morning to activate that cortisol response. Remember, we don't want to just decrease cortisol. We want to make sure that it's regulated. We want to make sure that our set point is at a reasonable level. We don't want to see it too high and we overreact to stress. We don't want to see it too low and we underreact to stress. We want it to be functional and regulated. So our stress response needs to be regulated, needs to be kind of low, and then there's a lot of space to move and have different responses to different stresses throughout the day. The best way is light, getting full sunlight in the morning. So, okay, imagine a sky with no clouds, full sunlight, first thing in the morning. You're going to be getting about 100,000 light lux. So in 10 minutes. So if we get ambient sunlight, so say it's a bit of a cloudy day, but it's still quite beautiful, you're going to be getting around 25,000 light lux. So you're going to have to stay outside for about 20 minutes. Say it's overcast. So Tasmania, all the time, overcast. So say there's no breaks in the clouds and it's just grey. You're going to be getting about 3,500 light lux in 35 minutes. Well lit indoors is only 500 in 3 hours. Dawn and dusk is 400 at 4 hours, and a phone screen is 2. And it takes you 6 hours to get 2 light lux. So you need to be getting at least 30 minutes of sunlight in the morning if it's overcast, or less than that. So the first thing that you can do in the morning, please just go outside and get some light in your eyes, because that is going to regulate your stress cycle and set that cortisol at its highest point first thing in the morning, and so it can down-regulate throughout the day so you can sleep better at night. Another one you can do is vagus nerve stimulation. So this is the longest cranial nerve, and it extends from the brain into the digestive system, and it branches out to the heart and lungs. So this is a part of an autonomic nervous system that controls autonomic functions like heartbeat and breathing. So this will innervate both the parasympathetic and the sympathetic responses. So rest and digest and reproduce, fight, flight, and flee. And survive, not thrive. So it's really important as a component of the parasympathetic nervous system. So the vagus nerve can help to slow down your heart rate, aid digestion, regulate immune responses, mood, speech, blood pressure, all the rest of it. So how can we stimulate this? So timing is really crucial. We want to be making sure that we're stimulating our vagus nerves in different ways throughout the day. So cold exposure in the morning can be really great. So say you're in Tasmania and you're in your follicular and ovulatory phases, having a cold shower in the morning if it's overcast outside is a really, really great idea. You probably won't want to do it because it's going to be winter, but overall it's going to be a really, really great way without light to make sure that you're increasing your cortisol in the first part of that day. And in the last part of your day, we want to be calming down the vagus nerve and we want to be promoting relaxation and reducing cortisol. So diaphragmatic breathing. So remember how I was talking to you about how we have this two-way communication between our breath and our nervous system, and how our nervous system can impact our breath and our breath can impact our nervous system. So this is an amazing tool that we can use and we can tap into this. I just want to imagine that you're in bed. What is the thing that you do? What is the breath that you usually hear people do? Short inhale, long exhale. Parasympathetic. What's the one that you exhibit when you get into cold water or you're shocked? Right? So short inhale. Long inhale, short exhale. So that's your sympathetic nervous system. So we want to be remembering that breath style and we want to be using it throughout the day. And this can be in the car with your eyes open at a stoplight or at the traffic lights, never while the vehicle's moving. And also please never do breath work like I'm suggesting in water because people have died. I'm a free diver. I've heard of people and I know of people who have died because they were doing breath work underwater and they passed out and they died. So please don't do this in water. Please, please, please. We want to be doing breath work at night, I would say. Well, you can do different breath work. In the morning, I do more of an activating, and at night, I do more of a, parasympathetic. And so it might mean breathing in for, a count of 6, breathing out for a count of 4. Let's just practice it now. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Maybe let's extend it. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you did that 20 times over, you would feel a pretty huge difference in your body before and after. And your breath is always accessible to you. Even if you have a stressful job, you're going to go and have a poo on company time. I hope you are. You're going to go to the bathroom. If you have a stressful meeting, if you have a stressful interaction with someone, you're having a hard time meeting deadlines, you're overworking yourself, any of these things, your breath is always there. You're breathing all the time. And it's a free resource that you can use, and it's really, really effective. Please don't undermine the power of the breath. Another thing that you can do is something called an adrenal cocktail. So, orange juice, sea salt, coconut water, super simple, but replenishes sodium and potassium, which balances your minerals with your stress response. The vitamin C will regulate cortisol. The electrolytes will fuel the cells improved for energy levels in the body, and they will help also with your adrenals and your kidneys. Also, for stress response, when we have a stress response, we go through a lot of magnesium. We go through a lot of B vitamins, vitamin C, and omega-3s. So if you have PTSD or CSPT, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, complex PTSD, you can supplement with these, and these will be really, really helpful. Things like L-theanine is also going to be really helpful. Matcha, if you're going to be having caffeine, switch to matcha because that's been shown over time to decrease cortisol and stress responses because of its polyphenol and L-theanine content, which I think is really nice. There are also some heavy hitter herbs that can be really helpful. Ashwagandha, so that's really great, can decrease the stress response by 15 to 16% and has been shown to decrease cortisol levels in the saliva. and in earwax. I said this before and I was like, I should touch on this. So one of the ways that your body gets rid of cortisol is in your earwax. And so I actually found this in March. I was producing so much earwax and I was like, what is going on? And I had to do ear candles over and over and over again. And in my research for this podcast, I found that that's one of the ways that in studies around cortisol, they actually measure cortisol. I mean, they're more likely going to do a 4-point or even a 2-point saliva test because that's just less gross than earwax. But they found that there was a huge amount of cortisol in the earwax. So if you're producing a lot of earwax, that you might be living a really stressful lifestyle. And so they found that ashwagandha decreased cortisol and anxiety. Ginseng, so that's something you can do in the day that's going to combat fatigue, that's going to enhance memory and reduces insomnia. Reishi is beautiful. I love reishi for most women. Ashwagandha is great. You need to be careful. You can't take it for too long. Please talk to a practitioner before taking ashwagandha. People take it for long periods of time, and I'm not really into that. Reishi is really, really great. Decreases, stress and increases our resilience to stress, strengthens our adrenal function. You can take it for a longer period of time. Take it in a tincture. That's going to be really great. Make sure it's an alcohol-based tincture. I do not like these companies who are using less and less alcohol. It just means the titration of that herb or that adaptogen, like a reishi mushroom, is going to be really poor. You're wasting your money. You may as well just get an alcohol extract. It's going to be way more effective, or even just a fruit body extract. If you're pregnant and you just don't want to take anything with alcohol, that's fine. Another thing is rhodiola. It helps to regulate cortisol levels. It reduces stress, improves endurance. Also really protective for your thyroid, which your thyroid can take a really big hit in times of stress. Those are all the fancy modern ways that we can deal with these things. I mean, not necessarily. These things are ancient and we're just modernizing them. I just want to talk about one of the most obvious ways that we can end the stress cycle, and that's exercise. When we were stressed in the environment and we had a perceived threat, what would we do? We would fight it, or we would fly away from it. And psychologists will also disagree and say, no, you fawn. And there's also there's a fourth. I forget it off the top of my head. Forgive me, comment it, because it's not in my brain right now, but there is a fourth. And there are stress responses that our parasympathetic nervous system can innovate as well, which I think is really fascinating. But if we just go back to the bare bones, cortisol energizes you. There's glucose in the blood system. Your heart rate is up. You're already in this activated state. Move your fucking body. Go to the gym. Tell your body, I've run away. I used to date someone in Canada years ago. And he was a little bit overweight. And, he had a bit of stress going on in his life at that time. And I felt really sorry for him. And he started to have anxiety attacks and he started to not be able to sleep. And he was just like, what do I do? Because I was just studying nutrition at the time. And I was maybe his only person in the world who he knew about these things. And I said, when I'm stressed, I run, and I run far because I want to tell my body that I've run away from the bear and that I've ended the stress cycle. And he was like, oh, that's actually really smart. I'm going to start doing that. And he popped up on my feed not long ago, and he's into running. He's the fittest he's ever been. All of his photos of him running, he looked super fit and healthy. And I'm just like, wow, that one conversation we had really changed the trajectory of your life. How incredible is that? And that's really a testament to just that simple fact. Exercise is one of the most important things you can do. And that's one of the things that really saved me in that stressful time that I had in March, was going to the gym. And even my partner was like, shouldn't you be chilling out? I was like, yes, I'm going to chill when I'm home. But right now my body just needs to release this energy. I have glycogen rolling around in my body and glucose. My heart rate's up. My heart's already activated. I'm in a perfect environment right now. My body's primed to exercise. I need to convince my body that I've fought this bear off. And those times I exercised and went really hard at the gym, or went for a really long run, or even a walk, I felt so much better afterwards. And the reason why, from a physiological perspective as well, is that we've used up that glucose. Our insulin doesn't have to be activated anymore because our muscles have used that energy. And from a central nervous perspective, we have switched our central nervous system into parasympathetic because we've run away from the bear. We've run away from the stress. We've fought it off. And so that's something I want you to remember as well, is that, yeah, take the supplements. Yeah, take the herbs. Yeah, do the labs. But babe, move your body, please. There is a huge gripe that I have with the cycle syncing community, because we're just sitting around talking about our feelings and drinking hot cocoa or cacao. Fucking get to the gym. You are supposed to be, women are designed to be incredibly strong. We can be incredibly strong. I've been going to the gym now and lifting weights for about a year and a half, and I've only just started to see like muscle tone and me being like, oh, I'm beefing out a little bit. You know what I mean? This fear that we have around the gym and becoming too bulky is just, I'm so over it. Build muscle and run away from the bear. Okay? Move your body. It's one of the most important things that you can do. I also want to talk about PTSD and CPSD, complex PTSD. I'm not a psychologist. I can't really talk about this too much. But if you've had a trauma in your life, little or large, and you can see yourself before trauma and after trauma, BT and AT. If you see a significant difference in your life, your central nervous system, and your stress response before and after this trauma, go to a psychologist and do EMDR. EMDR is pretty amazing. I've had it done and it completely changed the trajectory of my life. It didn't change everything about how I view a trauma in my life, but it absolutely changed my response to it. Absolutely, without a doubt. It desensitizes you to that trauma. It changes your perspectives and beliefs you had and imbued about yourself in that trauma, especially if it's like a sexual trauma, because this is something that women with PTSD around sexual trauma and rape will have, is that they will have these deep set beliefs about themselves and suspicions about themselves that they deserved that treatment. Even if women who have been in domestic abuse situations, I deserve that treatment. You know, we have all of these ways that we psychologically get through these really hard times in our life, and we need to be able to process them. And EMDR allows you to do that. It basically uses bilateral stimulation of your brain. And so a psychologist will be using either their hand, their fingers, or a tool, and you will be focusing on a certain emotion, belief, or thought or memory about the trauma, and you will go right into it. And you'll be able to feel all of the things that you were not able to feel in the moment. If you're a psychologist and you're listening to this and you're thinking that's a really crude example, well, you're correct, because I'm not a psychologist. That's just what my psychologist told me. If you've been through if you have any type of trauma, please, EMDR is pretty amazing. It's going to lower that high set point of cortisol because you're going to be able to process that trauma. So that's something that I also wanted to say. And also depression and anxiety, if you have high cortisol, this is something that can improve. And this is also something that you might need to look into and talk to someone about. You can do the physical aspects, but we also need to do the inner work as well. I think that's really important to mention. The last thing I wanted to touch on in relation to cortisol is cortisol face and bloating. Okay. The only way someone will have quote unquote cortisol face is if they have something called Cushing syndrome. And this is where you overproduce far too much cortisol, which is a very real diagnosis, and you might have it. If that is so, please go and follow those directions that I have around the 4-point saliva cortisol test, the DHEA, the ACTH. Because if they get tested by a good doctor and they're high, and you get tested again and they're high, then you might be diagnosed with Cushing syndrome. If you're watching people on Instagram and TikTok saying that this is what my face used to look like and this is what it is now, have a really good look at their Instagram. There is one person in particular that's coming to my mind, and she frustrates the living daylights out of me because she just lost weight. She just lost weight. And that's the thing you need to look at. And people can say, you know, I lost weight after decreasing my cortisol. Okay, I'm not going to disagree with that. That's a very real thing. When we decrease cortisol and we do a little bit less rather than more, it means we're not in a stress response and our body can actually metabolize energy instead of feeling like we need to store it because we're in a survival mechanism. Okay, yes, there is a very real reality to that. I'm not going to disagree with you. But 9 times out of 10, when I look at these people's Instagram and TikTok's accounts, you just lost weight. And you're trying to sell courses to women with absolutely no training behind you. And that is really, really problematic because we're playing on women's vanity and we're playing on women's insecurities in order to make money. I'm not about that. I think I get accused of that a lot. Stop fear mongering. I'm just telling the truth. If that scares you, I'm sorry. And that's not at all what I want to do, but I want to tell you the truth about the risks and benefits of different things and the truth, because women deserve to have that. There are a lot of, you know, there's a lot of people online who are selling you things and telling you things that aren't necessarily true. And that's basically something I really wanted to touch on. Be very, very wary of these people online. Please do not buy their courses. You know, most of what you could learn about the cortisol system, you can use in this podcast. these people online are making a lot of money off and benefiting off of the fact that women don't feel capable of educating themselves on these subjects, and they're making money out of people and playing on their insecurities and lying to them. I'm not into it. I'm really not into it. I'm not a big supporter of it. And also, alongside this, no hate to anyone who does this. 9 times out of 10, they've also had work done. You know, they're doing face yoga. Your face doesn't move, mate. I see you. Got nothing against it, personally. But, like, don't lie. You just lost weight. You went on Ozempic and had filler, babe. You're not fooling me. But unfortunately, when you look on their accounts, they've got hundreds of thousands of people following them. And they've got these people wrapped around their fingers, and they've got absolutely no training behind them whatsoever. It's really, really dangerous. Do not follow their advice. Okay, that's my little rant over. All right, thanks so much for listening to this pod. Hopefully you learned so much about the stress cycle. It's very real physiological aspects on the body, how it is a good physiological response. But if it goes a bit haywire and goes on for too long and doesn't have an obvious end, it can cause lots of problems for you. If you liked this episode, please like, subscribe, send to a friend, and I'll see you next time.